The checkout line at Hartwell's grocery was 12 people deep when Aubrey Sims told a 71-year-old man to put his groceries back. Not suggested it. Told him. Loud enough that the woman behind him looked away. Loud enough that the teenager bagging produce near the end cap stopped moving. Loud enough that Felton Graves, who had been standing quietly with a basket of 6 items and a $10 bill folded twice in his shirt pocket, understood exactly what was happening. "Sir, this register is for employees and premium card members only." Aubrey didn't look up from his screen when he said it. He was maybe 24, 25. Headset around his neck, a name tag that said Assistant Manager in capital letters. "You'll need to go to lane 7. Felton looked at the sign above the register. It said Express, 15 items or less. "I have 6 items, Felton said. "Sir." Aubrey finally looked at him. Up and down, the way someone scans a QR code. Quick and dismissive. "This lane has been reserved. I'm going to need you to move." Felton Graves was 5'6" and weighed 162 pounds. He wore a cardigan that had been washed so many times the navy blue had gone soft and pale at the elbows. His hair was white. His hands were spotted from decades of sun. He carried a canvas bag that his late wife Miriam had bought at a farmer's market in 1997, the one with the faded sunflower printed on the side. If you passed him in a parking lot, you would hold the door. You would not think twice about him. That was the thing about Felton Graves. Nobody thought twice. But once upon a time, before the cardigan, before the canvas bag, before 23 years of widowhood, and a twice-replaced hip, and a garden in the backyard of a house too big for one person. Once upon a time, Felton Graves had sat in front of United States senators and told them, with careful and complete precision, exactly where the American financial system was failing its most vulnerable citizens. He had testified before Congress 4 times. He had been cited in the legislation that reformed predatory lending practices in 11 states. He had spent 31 years as a civil rights attorney, the last 12 as a federal judge in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, before his wife got sick, and he decided that her last months were worth more than any verdict he could render. He had never told anyone in this neighborhood any of that, not his mail carrier, not the woman at the pharmacy who called him honey, not the young couple next door who waved from the driveway. He had buried that man along with Miriam, not out of grief exactly, but out of a choice, a deliberate, considered choice. He had seen what happened to men who couldn't stop being what the world had decided they were. He didn't want to be a title anymore. He wanted to be a person, a quiet one. And so Felton Graves stood in lane 3 at Hartwell's grocery with 6 items and a folded $10 bill. And he looked at Aubrey, and he said very calmly, "The sign says Express Lane, 15 items or less. I have 6, I'll wait my turn." Aubrey's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, lowered his voice in the way people do when they want to humiliate without witnesses. "I'm not going to ask you again." The woman behind Felton took a small step back, not because she was afraid, because she didn't want to be involved. Felton set his basket down on the conveyor belt. "Then don't," he said. What happened in the next 4 minutes would be recorded on 3 separate phones and the store's security system. What those recordings showed would eventually reach a courtroom. But first it had to reach the internet, and the internet had to decide what it meant. And for 72 hours, it decided wrong. Felton Graves had driven himself to Hartwell's on a Tuesday afternoon in October because he needed bread, a can of soup, 2 apples, a container of Greek yogurt, and a new sponge for the kitchen sink. Miriam used to handle the grocery list. That had been her domain, thoroughly and happily. For 23 years since her death, Felton had been relearning how to inhabit a life she had organized so well that he hadn't noticed until she was gone. He drove a 12-year-old Buick. He parked in the spot closest to the cart return. Because his hip was worse in the cold, and October had come in mean that year. He took his sunflower canvas bag from the passenger seat, the way he did every time, and he walked inside. He had been coming to this Hartwell's for 11 years. He knew where they kept the Greek yogurt. 3rd aisle, 2nd shelf from the top, pushed all the way to the left, because the stock person always left a gap on the right. He knew the self-checkout machines froze if you scanned too fast. He knew Margaret at the pharmacy counter kept butterscotch candies in a dish and would offer you one if you lingered. He was not a man out of place. He was a man who had built a quiet, specific life in this specific neighborhood, and that life was invisible to anyone who hadn't thought to look for it, which is why Aubrey Hayden, assistant manager, age 26, did not look for it. Aubrey had been having a bad day before Felton arrived. The afternoon delivery was late. 2 cashiers called out sick. He had a regional manager coming Friday, and the candy aisle was still not properly faced. He had been moving through the store with the contained fury of a man who needed everything around him to comply. And when he saw an elderly black man in a faded cardigan standing in the express lane he had been planning to use for his own lunch break, something in him made a decision that his brain did not slow down to examine. "Sir, this register is for employees and premium card members only." It wasn't even true. He had made it up in the moment, the way people sometimes manufacture authority when they feel the situation slipping. He had a headset, he had a name tag. And the man in front of him had white hair and a canvas shopping bag and a $10 bill folded twice in his pocket. It should have ended there. Felton should have moved. That was what Aubrey expected, what he had calculated without knowing he was calculating. Felton didn't move, and so Aubrey escalated. He called for the store's security guard, a man named Raymond who was 58 years old and had worked at Hartwell's for 9 years and did not want to do what he was being asked to do. Raymond stood at the end of the lane with his hands in his pockets and did not move toward Felton, did not speak. Aubrey shot him a look. Raymond looked at the floor. "I can call the police," Aubrey said, to Felton, to the lane, to no one in particular. "You can," Felton said. He had not raised his voice once. "That is certainly something you're able to do." Someone laughed. A woman 3 people back in line, hand pressed to her mouth, immediately suppressed. Aubrey's face went the color of a brake light. He stepped around the counter. He was 6 feet tall, and he used those 6 feet deliberately, positioning himself close enough to Felton that it was a statement without being a touch, a tactic. The kind that works on people who have something to be afraid of. Felton Graves had been a federal judge for 12 years. He had watched men try to intimidate him in courtrooms, in parking lots, in the hallways of federal buildings. He had learned over many years and in ways that had cost him something, how to go completely still. He went completely still. "I've asked you to leave this lane," Aubrey said. His voice, low and controlled now, performed. "You've asked," Felton said. "I've heard you, and I've told you that the sign above this lane indicates it is open to any customer with 15 items or fewer. I have 6, I'll wait." He turned and placed his bread on the conveyor belt, then his yogurt, then his soup. A phone was up somewhere in the back of the line. Then 2. Then the woman who had laughed quietly held hers up too, though her expression had changed from amusement to something harder. Something that recognized the shape of what was happening. Aubrey called the police. They arrived in 11 minutes. 2 officers, both young, neither of whom seemed entirely certain why they had been called. They spoke to Aubrey first, briefly, then approached Felton. "Sir, there seems to be a disagreement about." "I know what the disagreement is," Felton said. He was quiet and even. "I am happy to speak with you. I'd also like to note that I have done nothing wrong. I have not raised my voice, I have not threatened anyone, and I have not touched anything that isn't mine." One of the officers, a young woman with her hair pulled back, glanced at Aubrey. Then at the 6 items still sitting on the conveyor belt. Then at the sign that said Express, 15 items or less. "Sir," she said to Felton, "would you like to complete your purchase?" Aubrey opened his mouth. The officer looked at him. Just looked. He closed it. Felton paid for his 6 items with the $10 bill from his pocket. He put his change in his bag. He thanked the cashier whose name tag said Della, and who had been visibly shaking for the last 4 minutes. He thanked the officers. He walked out. He drove home. He put his groceries away. He made soup for dinner. He did not watch the internet that night. He rarely did. His granddaughter Camille called him at 8:15. Grandpa. Her voice had that particular tension in it, the one she'd had as a child when she was trying not to cry and trying not to let him know she was trying. Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Why? There's a video. 3 of the phones in that line had been recording. One of them caught Aubrey's face clearly. 2 of them caught the moment Felton turned and placed his groceries on the belt without responding to the intimidation. Which, the woman who posted it wrote in her caption, was the most dignified thing I've seen in a grocery store or possibly anywhere. That clip was shared 40,000 times before midnight, but the internet is not one thing. It is many things pulling in different directions at once. And by morning, a different clip had found a different audience. This one had been edited. It opened mid-confrontation. It showed Felton placing his items on the belt. But not what had led to it. Not Aubrey's manufactured policy. Not the deliberate physical positioning. Not the phone call to the police. What it showed was a security guard standing awkwardly nearby, 2 police officers speaking with an elderly man, and a caption that read, "Elderly man refuses to leave express lane, causes scene, forces police to respond." That version got more views. Comment sections that had celebrated Felton's composure 12 hours earlier filled with a different current by noon. People who had not seen the original clip and were seeing only the second. People who decided the story in under 10 seconds because that's what the platform trained them to do. Someone found Hartwell's Facebook page and left a 5-star review for Aubrey by name. Finally, a manager who enforces store rules. Place has been going downhill. Someone found the neighborhood next door page and posted that there had been an incident at the local Hartwell's involving an aggressive customer who had to be removed by police. Camille called again at noon. Her voice was different now. Still controlled, but the thing underneath it was no longer just worry. It was something older. Something inherited from watching her grandfather absorb things with his hands, very still. "They're saying." "You were causing trouble," she said. Felton was in the backyard. He had a cup of tea, and he was looking at what remained of his fall garden. 2 months ago, it had been tomatoes and pole beans, and the basil Miriam had always requested even though she'd been gone for decades. He still grew it, old habit, old love. "People say things," he said. "Grandpa, I know what I did and what I didn't do. That's enough. It's not enough. They're making you look like, they're making you look. I know what they're making me look like." A long quiet. "I'm coming over," Camille said. "You don't need to. I'm coming over." She arrived at 2. She was 34, a high school history teacher, and she had her grandmother Miriam's way of entering a room, which was to make it feel more organized, simply by being in it. She sat across from Felton at the kitchen table, with her laptop open, and showed him both videos side by side without comment. He watched them, all the way through. His face did not change. "Aubrey Hayden," he said when they were done. The assistant manager's full name had appeared in the comment section under the second video, posted by someone who either knew him or had looked him up. "Does he have a record of this kind of thing?" Camille looked at him. "Why?" "Because if it happened to me on a Tuesday afternoon, it happened to someone else on a Wednesday morning. That's how these things work." He set down his tea. He went to his study. He came back with a legal pad. Camille stared at it. "Grandpa, are you?" "I'm going to make some calls," he said. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" What followed was not fast, and it was not clean, and it did not look the way these things look in movies. There was no dramatic reveal, no single moment of obvious justice. There was instead the slow, patient, deeply unglamorous work of a man who had spent 31 years understanding exactly how institutions protect themselves and exactly where their vulnerabilities were. Felton called the Hartwell's corporate customer relations line. He was placed on hold for 22 minutes. He waited. He spoke to a representative named Shelby who read from a script. He asked to speak to someone with decision-making authority. He was told someone would return his call within 48 hours. He called the NAACP chapter in the county. He spoke to a woman named Ida who had been running the Legal Redress Committee for 16 years. She knew who he was before he told her. She said, "Judge Graves, I've been waiting to see if you'd call." He called an old colleague, a man named Thomas, who had argued cases before the Third Circuit, and now ran a firm that specialized in discrimination litigation. Thomas said, "Tell me what you need." And then, because Camille insisted and because he understood strategy, Felton sat down in front of her laptop and they recorded a 7-minute video together. Camille held the phone. Felton spoke to it directly, the way he had once spoken to juries. He did not raise his voice. He did not perform outrage. He stated facts in chronological order. He named the store. He named the lane. He named the sign above the lane. He described what Aubrey had said and did not editorialize. He noted that he had 6 items, that the store's own express lane policy allows 15, that he was asked to leave based on a policy the assistant manager fabricated on the spot, that police had been called, and that the officers themselves had allowed him to complete his purchase without incident. Then he said this, "I am 71 years old. I have given my life to the law. I sat on the federal bench for 12 years. I've argued for and protected the rights of people who couldn't protect their own. I'm telling you that story not to impress you, but because I want you to understand something. What happened to me in that grocery store happens every day to people who don't have my background, people who don't know their rights, people who move because they've learned that not moving has a cost. I didn't move. And I want to be honest with you. That is a privilege. Knowing you can hold your ground is a privilege. The work isn't celebrating me. The work is making sure every person in that line behind me has the same right." He paused. "My wife used to say that dignity is not something anyone can give you, but it is something people spend a lot of energy trying to take. Don't let them." Camille posted it that night at 9:47. By morning, it had 4 million views. The comments were different this time. Not because people are inherently better than the first clip suggested, but because the information changed, because Felton's face and his voice and his 7 unperformed minutes left very little room for an alternative interpretation. Because someone in the comments posted a side-by-side of the fabricated news version, and Felton's account and the timestamps did not lie. And because somewhere in the middle of the comment section, Thomas posted a single line from his firm's official account. "We are proud to represent Judge Felton Graves." More to follow. Aubrey Hayden had in fact done this before. That was what the next 2 weeks uncovered. Not dramatically, quietly. The way truth moves when people with institutional knowledge start making phone calls. 4 former Hartwell's employees came forward. 3 customers. One of them was a young black woman named Tiana, who had been asked to show her receipt at the exit, even though the white woman directly in front of her had not been asked. One was a man named Darnell, who had been told the store did not carry a particular item, walked to the shelf himself, and found 12 of them. None of them had said anything at the time. They had each, separately, made the calculation that speaking up would cost more than it would gain. What they had not calculated was Felton. Hartwell's corporate released a statement on day 4. It expressed their commitment to an inclusive shopping environment, and noted that the assistant manager in question had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. It did not name Aubrey Hayden. It did not use the word apology. Felton was asked about the statement by a reporter from the regional NBC affiliate who came to his house with a camera crew on a Wednesday morning. He answered the door in the same cardigan. "It's a beginning," he said. "A beginning is not a resolution. I want to see their internal discrimination policy. I want to see their training records for managers. And I want to know what happens to the people who came forward, because they took a risk I didn't have to take." The reporter, who was young and clearly hadn't expected this level of specificity, blinked. "You want access to their corporate training records? I want Hartwell's to publish their anti-discrimination policy and their complaint resolution process publicly on their website and update it quarterly. That's what I want." He paused. The soup was fine, by the way. The bread was good. I'll go back when this is resolved. The clip of that exchange, specifically the last two sentences, was played on regional news that night and clipped to social media approximately 11,000 times. Hartwell's retained outside counsel the following week. Thomas's firm filed suit 10 days after that. The complaint alleged racial discrimination in a place of public accommodation, negligent supervision, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It sought damages, and more specifically, it sought injunctive relief. A court order requiring Hartwell's to implement enforceable, auditable anti-discrimination practices across all 42 of their locations. Money doesn't change behavior, Felton told Camille over dinner one night during the filing. Policy changes behavior. Policy with consequences changes behavior. You sound like you're preparing a charge to a jury. Maybe I am. She looked at him across the table. The legal pad was open beside his bowl. The sunflower canvas bag hung on the hook by the back door. In the corner of the kitchen, on the shelf above the cookbooks, was a photograph of Miriam at the farmer's market where she'd bought that bag, laughing at something outside the frame. She would have loved this, Camille said. Felton looked at the photograph for a long moment. She would have told me not to let it take over the garden, he said. She was always right about that. The case settled 4 months later. The terms were not sealed. Felton had insisted on that. What Hartwell's agreed to was this: a publicly available anti-discrimination policy, mandatory quarterly training for all managers and supervisory staff at all 42 locations, an independent ombudsman to receive and review customer discrimination complaints for a period of 3 years, and a fund administered through the local NAACP chapter to provide legal literacy workshops for community members on their rights in commercial spaces. The fund was named the Miriam Graves Community Education Fund. Felton did not hold a press conference. He did not do a victory lap. He called Ida at the NAACP chapter. He called Thomas. He called Camille. Then he went to Hartwell's and bought bread and soup and 2 apples and a container of Greek yogurt and a new sponge for the kitchen sink. He used the express lane. He had 6 items. Nobody said a word. He put his change in the sunflower bag and drove home. That spring, on a Saturday morning in April, Felton stood in front of 43 people in the meeting room of the Garrison Road Public Library. They had come from around the county. Some had driven 40 minutes. There were teenagers and retirees, and a woman who had taken the bus because she didn't have a car and the workshop was free, and she had read about it on the library's community board. She was 64 years old. Her name was Beverly. She sat in the front row with a yellow legal pad of her own and a pen that said First National Bank on the side, the kind they give you for free when you open an account. Felton stood at the front of the room without notes. You have rights in commercial spaces, he said. Every one of you, not because someone is going to give them to you, but because the law says they are yours. What I want to do this morning is make sure you know what they are, what it looks like when they're violated, and what you can do about it. He paused. I'm going to tell you a story first, about a grocery store, about 6 items and a $10 bill, and about what happens when you don't move. Beverly's pen was already moving. When Felton Graves came home from the library that afternoon, he walked through the back door and stood in the garden for a while. The basil was just starting to come in. It needed thinning. He would do it tomorrow. Or maybe after dinner. He had time. I think about Felton often, about what it costs a person to be quiet for years. Not out of fear, but out of choice, out of the decision to be a person instead of a symbol. And then, what it costs to stop being quiet. Not for yourself, but because you finally understand that the thing you've been protecting by staying silent is the very thing someone else needs you to say out loud. Standing up doesn't mean you won't pay for it. It means you decide the price is worth it. And it means you make sure when it's over that the next person pays a little less than you did. Left foot back, hands open. If someone in your life made that choice, stepped forward when everything told them to step back, tell me about them in the comments. I'll read everyone. And if this story found you at the right moment, share it. Because somewhere out there, there's someone standing in a line, holding 6 items, trying to decide whether to hold their ground. They need to know it's worth it.